till Katarina, Fanny och Ami att ni också påminner alla oss som har möjlighet att använda vår röst och vårt fria ord att vi också ska göra det. Ett annat land där pressfriheten är kraftigt begränsad och där de oberoende medierna kämpar i motvind är Ryssland. Och vi ska nu få möta Anna Kireeva som är journalist från Murmansk och Tobias Ljungvall från Östgruppen i ett samtal om medielagstiftningen i Ryssland och dess påverkan på det fria ordet. Welcome to Globala torget, Anna och Tobias.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I am Tobias Ljungvall from Östgruppen, and most of the speaking will be done by Anna Kireeva from the network Barents Press, which is a network of journalists in the northern parts of Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Russia. Anna is the coordinator of the network in Russia, and they've been around since the 90s, since the time of the when there was a lot of NGO cooperation between Russia and Sweden and other Nordic countries, and they have survived this far into the Putin era, you could say, and they are still very active. And the latest thing they have done is the latest thing I have done, not the last thing. The latest thing they have done is to publish this book called Journalism по-русски, Journalism in Russian. It's available in English and, on the flip side, in Russian. And this book, and Anna has her copy as well, she got it just today, but she knows what's in it because she wrote it. And this book is based on interviews with a large number of Russian journalists that Anna conducted, and it contains everything you need to know about working conditions for Russian journalist colleagues. So it's primarily meant for Swedish journalists, but also I think for everyone who is interested in press freedom in Russia. So Anna, what is it that we need to know about working conditions for Russian journalists? Please tell us.
Thank you, Tobias. In spite of the 25 years of very successful cooperation between the journalists in the Barents countries, recently, pretty often in international conferences, the Russian journalists can hear these notes of that in Russia the journalism is very weak, or the journalists are not very professional, and there's all this mentoring sounds sometimes. So we in Barents Press decided to tell the Western and Nordic journalists, first of all, about the conditions of the work for the Russian journalists, what it means to be a journalist in modern Russia, what are you allowed to talk about or write about, what not, what consequences it can bring, how can you, what are the limitations and the media laws for media and for journalists and editors, what is the punishment, and how, as a professional journalist, you can balance in between of all this, doing a professional job. So that is the book about. Yes, I talked to 28 journalists in total from all the Russian Barents regions, like Murmansk region, Arkhangelsk, Komi and Karelia, and several journalists from St. Petersburg as well, the Northwest. And I asked them the same list of questions, something about 20 of them. And they were answering pretty honest, and I never get tired of thanking all the journalists who agreed to participate in this project. And we promised that it would be anonymous, because they were journalists from governmental-owned media or independent or private, and from all kinds, like TV and online, printed media, and so on and so on. So they were talking about their conditions of work. And of course, they were telling that in pro-governmental media, there are some subjects which will never be published. I mean, all the protests, all the stories where regional or municipal authorities can look negatively. If they are covering any demonstration, it should be a positive demonstration, supporting this or that. They would never cover many problematic things. But also, they try to do their work as good as they can. And there are many other genres and many other stories about people where journalists can show their professionalism. But also, I got to know that many journalists learned again the Soviet skill to write in between the lines. And the readers learned the skill to read between the lines, as it was in the Soviet times. And journalists learned how to do that using different names and metaphors and sayings which says a lot and means nothing. Like if you say, let's say, Beslan, it says a lot to any Russian citizen. Or if you don't want to say revolution, for example, a protest, say 1917, and everyone will understand what it is about. Or use 1937, it tells more than 100 words to any Russian person. Or 1941, 9th of May,
40.
or 90s. So you will, if you're a professional, you will find a way to express what you need, especially if you are very lucky with the editor.
So if I could try to decipher some of those years and dates for people who may not follow what you mean, Beslan means the repressive struggle against Caucasian terrorism and the human rights abuses connected with it, I guess. And 1937 are the Stalin repressions, of course, mass killings. 1945 or 9th of May is the cult of the Second World War. And the 1990s is the total mess that was called the democracy. Am I reading the right things into these?
You have a very interesting interpretation, but you know what you mean, of course.
Yeah, okay. That's good enough, I guess.
Yes,
Sorry,
so
please continue.
yes, but there are other journalists from, if the media is not state-owned, then the journalist can cover almost everything going on in the country. But they are limited by the very strict media law regulations. It's the laws are made in such a way that they can be interpreted in any way. So no one really knows the rules of the game. And when it comes to covering sensitive subjects like Second World War and the results of the Second World War, or LGBT community, or suicides, and many other sensitive topics in Russia. Many media houses prefer never to touch such subjects because the rules are very, well unclear, and it's easier not to even come close to this double white line, as we call it, in order not to cross it, because the punishment is really huge, from fines to closing down the media. Yes, and of course we asked the Russian journalist about how do you think what the Western journalists think about them and journalism in Russia, and are they right or wrong in their impression about Russian journalism, and what would they say to to their Western colleagues? And these answers were very, very interesting from all the journalists. Um, First of all, I heard the sound of this very good professional enviness. Like, we would really like to work in such conditions as Nordic journalists have. When your task is just to be a professional journalist, discover a story, investigate it, and write it in a good professional way. That's it. Not camouflage it in different layers and then do your best to make it publish and then avoid all the possible negative consequences personally to you and then to your media house and editors. So I do believe that the level of professionalism of Russian journalists is incredibly high. And those colleagues from other countries who estimate Russian journalism only by what they see on the national television, they make a big mistake. That's the regional journalism is far from it. And of course, it would be all the journalists are also saying that cooperation between the journalists is also an incredible thing. When you have the opportunity to learn how the society of your neighboring country works, how the institution works, what is okay and what is not okay for the mentality of this or that society. Of course, it leads to less fake news produced by journalists and media houses. Yeah.
Yeah. you mentioned some of these sensitive topics. The book is organized around these topics, and there are more of them than one might imagine. Some of them I think many of us have heard about. We heard about the so-called gay propaganda law that was adopted some years ago, which prohibits propagating non-traditional sexual relations to minors to protect them from mental or harmful development officially, but which is used to crack down on the LGBT community and the organizations of this community, and makes it impossible to write about these issues in a balanced and neutral or informative way. We may also have heard about, let's see now, some other examples that you mentioned.
Well, if I may, I think one of the most interesting examples for the Western audience can be the insult of the authorities, a very strange and interesting law no one can interpret. By the insult of the state symbols, according to usual logic, that should be the anthem, the national flag, the constitution, that you should definitely do no harm to. But sometimes Russian officials believe they are the state symbols, and publishing any negative stories about personalities in authorities do insult them. And then there are court cases, and court doesn't consider if the story is fake or not. The story is about how the official is insulted by the article or the reportage. That's an absolutely interesting thing going on in Russia now. One of the media laws accepted not long ago, or a fantastic law about fake news. I always believed that fake news is a thing which is regulated by the journalistic ethic and professionalism. But in Russia, it's a law. It's prohibited to publish fake news.
Yeah.
But what is fake and what is not, the law doesn't say. And it's according to the court and according to the watchdogs like Roskomnadzor, what is fake and what is not. And it became stricter even during the COVID pandemic. Because they changed it a bit, and so now only the official information is not fake. So you have no right to doubt in what do officials say, even if you investigated a different story.
Yeah, you mentioned the Roskomnadzor. It's the Russian Mass Media Inspection Authority, and they are very active, aren't they, in Russia?
They are, but they are the executors of the laws. They have the function to find the violations, and now they have this digital system which reads like a robot, which reads all the media and just automatically points what rule is violated and what words are used. For example, in this book we also write that I don't know what happened since when the word suicide became illegal, or journalists can have no right to describe the methods of suicide in order not to propaganda it among teenagers. But sometimes it leads to a completely different story. So the robots of Roskomnadzor, they Google to these words, and then the fines come or warnings come to the media houses, like you need to check or correct or disclaim the article.
This was an eye-opener for me that one of these topics was suicide. You're actually forbidden to describe concrete suicides, how they happened, how they were committed, according to Russian law. And you have an example here that I remember reading about in Russian media the other year. When it happened, there was a young man who was arrested by the police, and after that he threw himself off the roof of a 10-story building and died. And I read this story, and there was something missing because everything surrounding his actual death was not there. So sorry, I'm for laughing, but it was really.
It makes many journalists laugh because when you read it, the story is the man walked out through the window. That's it. That's the story. You cannot write in the end that he died. Otherwise, it will be connected. So you kind of describe the method. Or you can write that a woman was found dead somewhere and surrounded by pills, something like that. But it can be difficult. But also we had. Otherwise, if you publish the methods, if you publish the word suicide, you will be fined. And if you do it many times, then your media can be closed. But we had an amazing story several years ago, an amazing story of heroism of the editor of a newspaper. In 2016, there was a number of large tragedies in Russia when kids and teenagers were committed suicides. It was like the wave of suicides happening on the very same day in different regions of Russia. And no one could understand what's going on. The kids were not connected. The regions were not connected. Families didn't know each other. Nothing was similar. And then one of the newspaper investigated this story, and they found out that all the kids were members of one of the groups or communities in one of the social networks. And they were playing the online game with the administration of this group. And they were given different tasks. Be there, do this, show there. Hello? Hello? Yeah,
Yeah,
be there, do
you're
this. Yes. And they were doing different tasks. And in several weeks, the new task was to commit suicide. And some kids and teenagers were doing this, some were not. And then the journalists, they discovered this thing, they investigated it. And then the question was, we can't publish anything. We will be closed. We will be out of job tomorrow. And then the editor decided that if they publish the story and it can save at least one life of a teenager, they will go for it. So he wrote a huge disclaimer about the risks they are aware about, but what can they do? And they published the article. It was all about suicides and methods of suicides and how many kids, and and also kids who are not adults. It's also a sensitive story. What you can do, what you cannot do. So and it was one of the examples of this hero attitude, because nothing bad happened to the newspaper. They were not fined, they were not warned, they were not closed down, but there was an investigation case against the administration of this community in the social network. And I know that the investigative committee was working with it. I don't know the end of the story, but the suicide stopped.
So there is um, there is the question of these. I mean, in Sweden we have ethical guidelines for mass media, and they are self-regulatory. So we have a self-regulation among Swedish mass media. And in Russia, which is very clear from this book, you have laws and regulations that can be very rigid, but also, as you mentioned, arbitrarily interpreted, perhaps often. Like in this sense, when the suicide story was clearly against the rules, but still
Yes.
went ahead because nobody could claim that it was wrong to stop these suicides from happening. But
I would say that's more
I'm
than an
thinking about
exception.
another. I'm thinking about another example in the opposite direction. The LGBT and feminist activist who was recently has she been sentenced yet? I'm not sure, but she's been accused of pornography because she made some drawings showing the female body. And the purpose of these drawings are for mostly young girls, I guess, not to be ashamed or have complexes about their body, and and thinking that they need to be look like models. So it's pretty common sense message to which is very common in Sweden as well. But they contain illustrations of the female genital organs, and according to Russian law, that's forbidden to depict. So formally, they are in violation of the law, but there is nothing sexual about these pictures, these drawings, actually. Absolutely nothing sexual about them, and yet she is accused of pornography. And it's obviously absurd, but I think this is happening to her because she has been an LGBT activist for a long time, and she's previously been fined for gay propaganda. So the authorities are out to get her in a way that they weren't in the suicide case, and then they can use these laws arbitrarily against whomever they please to
Yeah,
accuse.
there can be a number of such cases. I also asked journalists about if there is any positive change in their work. And many of them say, when we look back, like what we were writing 5, 7, 10 years ago, and see what we are writing now, it's like it's a completely different story. Everything is stricter and stricter and narrow and more narrow. But when it comes to LGBT topic, that's absolutely unique subject, because I don't know what happened with our society since 90s, but we became very, very intolerant. We, I don't know, grew up this hatred towards people who are different than us. And also, when I asked the journalist, and some of these quotations are in the book, I asked the journalist, how do you write about LGBT if you do? And some were so rude and intolerant to LGBT community. They were not afraid to say that they are sick people, and they are not going to touch the subject. They should be cured, or I don't know, be in some reservations. There were other journalists who said, we don't care if the people are gay or not gay. The only thing I care about is the news or not. So even journalists, and they don't hide that it can be unprofessional approach, but they are people, and they can be intolerant, or they don't care. So LGBT is a very, very specific subject in Russia, as well as the insult of the feelings of believers. I never knew that. I didn't know that believers are so sensitive and can be easily offended when it comes to other people having right not to believe in something. And it's another law in Russia: never offend the feelings of believers.
Yeah, it's interesting that these regulations that put these limitations on press freedom, they are not. It seems to me they're not primarily aimed at press freedom. I mean, there's not a big press freedom law, but there are different laws protecting different groups or rules that are not perhaps directly related to media, but out of other concerns. But the result is the limited press freedom. So
Yes.
would you say that today limited press freedom is a result of it's a secondary result of the general development of Russian society in a more conservative and direction?
Kind of a side event, you mean? Side effect, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, probably, but media is an important part of the society. And of course,
Yeah.
I believe that there are many interested parts who would want to control it, which is more and more difficult in frames of the social networks, and in frames of the because of there is a lot of cooperation and open borders, at least in the nearest past.
Yeah.
But also, there is now the law in Russia that every person or every journalist, every media can be labeled as a foreign agent if they are in contact with foreigners and have foreign funding. So that's another limitation.
And a year ago, this was extended so that even freelance journalists or bloggers perhaps could be individually listed as foreign agents if they cooperated with foreign media,
Yeah,
or received
absolutely
some
right.
sort of financing from abroad. Yeah.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
But so far, this has not happened, and there seems to be more room for tightening the controls in these laws that you have in Russia than what is the case right now.
No. We have 10 medias who are in the list of the foreign agents. We
The
don't
media,
have,
yes,
we don't have
liberty.
individuals so far. No.
Yeah.
But wait.
Yeah. So things happen gradually. A law is introduced, and in some time it starts being applied, and perhaps in the future it will be applied more broadly.
Yes,
So everything does not happen at once when a new law is introduced.
It's the same way as it happened with the foreign agent laws for NGO. First, it was made, I think, in 2012, but it wasn't used for several years until the society comes down. But then, within 1 year, they found more than 100.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. can I ask you about Barents Press? It's so in Sweden, it's the northern regions like Norrbotten and Västerbotten and perhaps Västernorrland. I'm not sure. In Russia, you mentioned them. It's Karelia, it's the Murmansk region, Arkhangelsk region, and Komi Republic. Right.
Yeah, and Nenets region.
And Nenets region.
And Nenets region.
Is this a distinct region in Russia, or is it just like the rest of Russia?
Well, first of all, they are northern regions. Most of them are very high north, and they always have been different from what was in the middle part of Russia. I mean, for example, I'm based in Murmansk, but I was born in the middle part of Russia, just like a couple hours of drive from Moscow. But I was a kid when we moved to Murmansk, and I definitely saw a huge difference. Even in the end of 80s, Murmansk region was very, very, I would say, foreign. People were talking foreign languages in the restaurants, and nobody pointed fingers on them. I don't know. We in the middle part of Russia, in the 80s, there was a deficit of all these jeans and chewing gums and sneakerses and all this. In Murmansk, it was a usual story when your father works in the sea and he just brings it to you. So it was very, very different from the middle part of Russia. It was more Western, and of course we have like borders 2 kilometers from Murmansk. It's 220 kilometers to Norway and 250 to Finland, and over 2,000 to Moscow. So we're a little bit geographically closer to Nordic countries, and people are different. Of course, in the high north, people are a bit different than in the middle or southern part of Russia.
In the same way that Sweden is, in Sweden, northerners are considered more calm and perhaps slower.
Yes, same here.
In the
same
south.
Here.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
And in the north, people very seldom go to any protests or manifestations. So what happened in Arkhangelsk with Shias was such an exemption. I mean, people need to be so much tired of what is going on to protest officially, publicly, openly in the north that it was like, it was a bad story for them.
Yeah. In Shias, the authorities wanted to establish a waste dump that would have poisoned waters, perhaps, in a large area. And people really protested and actually stopped this from happening.
Yes, they won. And that's another story about Russian protests, because now more and more environmental concern is growing in people. And they do protest because they want to live in a nice environment and care about what air they breathe and what water they drink. Yeah, but Barents Press was established in the beginning of 90s by the journalists from all the 4 countries, Norway, Finland, Sweden, and Russia. And since then it's developing. Since then we do our best to bring journalists together, to get them know more about each other and the neighboring countries. And it's I would definitely say that it's a success story of cooperation. And on many different conferences in Russia, also in neighboring countries, I hear that we need to have some association of journalists cross-border. And then everyone say, look at Barents Press, what they do the same.
Yeah. I think our time is running out here now. So hopefully we will get the chance during the next book fair here to continue this talk. But for now, I think it's ending. So thank you very much, Anna, and thanks to anyone who's been listening and watching or will watch the recording of this video talk. And good luck to you in the future with journalism in the Russian Barents region and Russia. Thank you.
Thank you, Tobias, and good luck everyone with the conference, with the book fair.
Yeah.